Hello friends and subscribers, and if one has been keeping up with current events, then of course you know the midterm elections have just concluded. The original video I was going to make after the midterms has been significantly altered due to the results of the election. I was going to make a more scripted video, while this one is a bit of a more improvised hot take. With that, of course this video will be dealing with things that are a primary concern to my fellow Americans, and will be addressing them as such. But as always, my non-American audience is free to join in the discussion and comment. So why is this video different than the one I was originally going to make is due to the fact that I have called every presidential election since 2004. I knew George W. Bush was going to be re-elected that year, and early on, by August 2007, I knew Barack Obama was going to be the next president of the United States after Bush, and I knew he would defeat Romney in the 2012 presidential election. And I also knew early on in 2015 that Donald Trump would be the next president of the United States. As for midterm elections, I have been relatively spot on since 2006. I knew the Democrats would become the majority again that year. I knew the Republicans would take back the House by large margins in 2010, and then cement their gains in 2014. So how did I call all of this? Is it out of clairvoyance? Am I some kind of Nostradamus? No. It's not that hard actually, but I prefer to keep my secrets to myself. But here's a hint. Pay attention to the media. All of the media. And I will say no more of that. That said, however, it is somewhat dismaying for me to say that for once I was partially wrong about the midterms. This year I was. My final prediction was that the Democrats would gain seats in the House, but not enough to take it, which they actually did. This is pretty much why the original video I was going to make is different from the one you are watching now, because I predicted even less success from the Democrats than what originally happened, and my original video plan was being what made the Republicans win and the Democrats lose, although we'll get into some of that to an extent in this video. Since taking the House, the Dems have earned a significant foothold, but of course nowhere near as much as they had hoped for and what was initially forecasted. But that is all they really did, and by a very thin margin, making the blue wave that everyone was predicting as soon as the 2016 presidential election was concluded into a blue ripple at the most. The Republicans still gained in the Senate and maintained most of the governorships, with the only major governorship that was a blow to the president being the loss of Scott Walker in Wisconsin. But other than that, Trump still had a relatively successful night. Anyway, what impact will this election have on our country? Well, officially, we will have a divided government. A Republican presidency, Senate, and judiciary, but a Democrat-controlled lower house. So while the rest of the government is solidly in Trump's control, the Democratic House will make things harder for him to pass certain legislation. But it's important to note that the Democrats only make up a small majority in the House and not a supermajority, which would have been a major problem for President Trump and the Republicans. But as of right now, with the slim majority they have, it shouldn't be that hard for Trump and the Republicans to sway a handful of Democrats to pass something they need. A Democrat-controlled Senate, on the other hand, even by a small majority, would have been a much bigger problem for Trump, considering it's the Senate who confirms his appointments and ratifies treaties and other stuff like that. But as we know, part of the anticipated blue wave was a Democratic takeover of the Senate, in addition to the House of Representatives, but the opposite happened. The Republicans gained a few seats. Other strategists have stated that if the economy tanks, or if something fails to happen, Trump can blame the Democrats, and that might just work. Because when the credit downgrade happened under Obama, he blamed the Republican-controlled House for it, and it worked. This will especially work if the Democrats use their majority in the House to merely disrupt the president by moving forward with impeachment proceedings and stupid shit like abolishing ICE, or not providing funding for border security. If the Democrats try to sabotage the president in the House, it will only make them look bad and will in no way help them in 2020. But the thing is, the Democratic Party is still very much a divided party. The old guard types like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer still run the party, but still have radical insurgent types like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to deal with, who have joined the ranks of the Democrats. These pragmatic old guard types will do a better job at trying to work with the president, while the radical left elements, who have gained a stronger foothold in the party since 2016, will try to be more of a problem for them and who they refer to as the corporatist Democrats. And speaking of the progressive and old guard split in the Democratic Party, even pragmatic leftists like Kyle Kulinski have tried to suggest that the more far left a politician is, the better they will do. And as this election will tell you, that's not really the case. Sure, a few radicals, and even a dim-witted one like the aforementioned Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez slipped through the cracks in a solidly Democratic area of New York, and then the far-left governor, Andrew America was never great Cuomo, won the whole state. But in Florida, look, I know it's been more than a week. We're kind of approaching 2 weeks at this point. After the election, there are still some ongoing disputes and counts going on. But as of right now, it looks like the results will not change. But as of November 11th, the further left candidate for governor, Andrew Gillum, lost to Ron DeSantis, a fairly right-wing candidate. And if that changes, then it changes. But I'm just going at what it is as of right now. Beto O'Rourke, who ran against Ted Cruz, also ran on a further left-wing platform. And you'll notice I'm saying further left, because although these people aren't far left, they are definitely way more to the left than a center-left person like Hillary Clinton. In Georgia, Stacey Abrams, a radical type, lost to Brian Kemp, with the results of those elections just being certified the other day. So I'm not sure if going further left is really helping the Democrats as much as Kyle and others are hoping. Sure, Cortez won in New York, as did Andrew Cuomo and Gavin Newsom in California, but even a solidly Democratic area isn't that guaranteed for a further left victory. In solidly Democrat-run Massachusetts, that re-elected Elizabeth Warren by 60% of the vote, voted by the same percentage to re-elect Governor Charlie Baker, a Republican who defeated the Social Democratic candidate Jay Gonzalez. Although one can argue that Baker is a never-Trumper rhino, which may have helped him. But the point is, even in left-leaning Massachusetts, they went with someone closer to the middle ground than someone who was further to the left of that. This is because, contrary to what Kulinski and others have asserted, moderately liberal online pundits such as Tim Pool and even former politicians such as Joe Lieberman have pointed out that the Democrats going further to the left will probably hurt them in the long run. Let's face it, America is 42% conservative, 36% moderate, and 21% liberal, with the majority of both liberals and conservatives considering themselves closer to the center than with either going with the extreme right or the extreme left. Most Americans live in the middle and do not want to go with an extreme left or an extreme right government. But with America being seen as a center-right country with conservatives making up the plurality of the population, if given the choice between an extreme right candidate or an extreme left candidate, then more than likely they'll go with the extreme right candidate. So why hasn't the further left become very popular with the American people outside of younger Americans? Well, that was what my original video was going to be about, so I'll keep this part much shorter than what it was originally going to be. But to summarize why the Democrats aren't that popular, well, for me and perhaps many others, can be brought down to one reason. The Democratic base has become increasingly unhinged. After establishing that the left thinks Trump is a fascist and a white supremacist who only won the election due to Russian interference, therefore his administration is illegitimate, then why should we be civil? This time, it's not just a few loudmouths or far-left activists and Antifa calling for incivility. You have several prominent Democratic politicians calling for incivility. This first began with Maxine Waters earlier this summer by calling on people to harass administration officials if they are spotted in public.
If we can't protect the children, we can't protect anybody. If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
Maxine Waters was condemned by other Democrats such as Chuck Schumer, but of course other people took this to heart, and there have been numerous examples of prominent administration officials and certain elected Republicans being harassed outside of their homes and at restaurants by overzealous protesters. This article from True North Reports has detailed and documented dozens of accounts of left-wing protesters and/or Antifa engaging in harassment, violence, and other forms of intimidation against Republicans and people they don't like, starting from the 2016 presidential election to June 2018. There have, of course, been other instances since then, such as left-wing protesters harassing Mitch McConnell in a Mexican restaurant. But highlights from this article include the doxing of 1,500 ICE agents by a far-left college professor, and the doxes spread by Antifa on Twitter. The shooting of Steve Scalise, Kristen Nielsen, and Steve Miller being chased out of restaurants, and then being protested at their homes by angry leftards. A local GOP headquarters being vandalized and firebombed. Link in the description for all these. And it's not like these are the only examples. In my Parkland video, I documented harassment and intimidation of NRA officials in the aftermath of the Parkland shooting. And these are not isolated incidents. The FBI and DHS released a report last year warning about the rise of Antifa and the rise of political violence coming from the extreme left. I, and most other people, do not recognize this as legitimate resistance to an unjust administration. This is just straight-up political violence against people these people don't like. Trump and the Republicans aren't Nazis, and America is not the new Third Reich. I mean, in my video on the Spanish Civil War, I noted that the political climate of Spain in the 30s has become frighteningly similar to the political climate of America, and perhaps Western Europe as a whole, here in the late 2000 teens. And this will probably carry on into the early 2020s, but this is not helping. Hillary Clinton has also told Democrats there's no reason to be civil with Republicans until they regain control of the House. Well, Hillary, by your logic, if you won the election and Republicans were a minority in the House, they had no right to be civil with you until they got control of that House. Further points that put the Democrats at odds with the American people is on immigration. Now, when it comes to illegal immigration, most Americans support deporting those who come here illegally and tend to favor stronger border security. The Democrats, however, would rather give blanket amnesty, more third world immigration, no tangible border security, more programs for the welfare state, and will fight tooth and nail against even the most moderate of voter ID laws. All those things put together are a recipe for disaster. Now, while most Americans are not on board with the alt-right's idea of America becoming a white ethno-state, but that doesn't mean they want anybody and everybody to just come here. Most Americans are in the middle. They don't care what color or religion you want, just so long as you speak English and embrace American values and identify as being an American when you come here legally. While some may favor a path toward citizenship for some illegal aliens, most want tougher border security and a more sensible immigration policy. Polls and experts have pointed out that immigration is a losing issue for the Democrats, as most Americans agree with the Republicans on immigration, which is why the Democrats try not to talk about it and Trump constantly brought it up, especially in the face of the incoming caravans. Because immigration is a winning issue for the Republicans and a losing one for the Democrats. Now, despite all of this, the Democrats still managed to take the House, albeit by a very small margin, so how did they do it? Many commentators don't necessarily attribute it to Donald Trump or a lack of popularity on his behalf. I mean, his approval ratings have since gone up significantly since first taking office. But this was your typical midterm. The ruling party lost seats. But the Democrats do have some winning issues of their own. Nancy Pelosi attributes the Democrats' House win to health care, which is a winning issue for the Democrats, which is why they tried to bring that up as opposed to the Republicans' immigration talking points. 8 years ago, then President Obama and the Democratic-controlled legislature passed the Affordable Care Act, better known colloquially as Obamacare. Prior to Obamacare, the American healthcare system was rife with problems, mainly the cost of private insurance. And even most Democrats will admit his attempts at fixing America's healthcare problems were fairly disastrous. So how is this helping the Democrats if their previous efforts have gone badly? Well, it is simple. The perception is the Republicans lack vision on healthcare. Like the Democrats on immigration, the Republicans appear to be content with the status quo, and have never really offered any alternatives of their own. And the few alternatives they have offered are really just Obamacare light at best. One of the things that unites the further left Democrats and the corporatist old guard is a common vision for healthcare, which includes expanded coverage and universal coverage for every single American, which in theory will improve the quality of American healthcare. Whether or not it actually does is a different issue. The point being that the Democrats have something what they consider to be a solution to America's healthcare problems. The Republicans, by and large, don't. Solutions or perceived solutions win. Lacking solutions don't. I think this will wrap up my video for today. those were just my thoughts on what happened and why they happened. And now we'll see how this plays out in the incoming session of Congress next year, and how this will, of course, lead to the elections in 2020. Until then, stay tuned for part 2 of Spawnathon.